My girlfriend said, "We've decided you're not my type," in front of her entire friend group. So I replied, "Thanks for clarifying I was dating all of you," and left. What happened next proved I dodged a massive bullet. Hey Reddit, my girlfriend stood up in front of her 5 best friends and told me they'd all collectively decided I wasn't her type anymore, like I was some kind of committee decision that required a group vote. I looked at all 6 of them, said my piece, and walked out. What followed showed me exactly what kind of nightmare I'd escaped from Buckle Up. Because this story gets wild. I'm Blake, 30 years old, and I work as a digital forensics investigator here in Portland. Basically, I spend my days analyzing data breaches and cybercrime evidence for law enforcement agencies across the Pacific Northwest. It's the kind of job where you stare at computer screens for hours, following digital breadcrumbs that criminals think they've erased, piecing together evidence that puts bad guys behind bars. The work's intense but deeply satisfying. There's something about finding that one deleted email or recovered file that cracks a case wide open that just hits different. Most people think it's boring, just me in a basement with computers and energy drinks. But I genuinely love the puzzle aspect of it. Every case is like solving a mystery, where the clues are buried in terabytes of data, and you need to be part detective, part computer scientist, and part psychologist to figure out what actually happened. My typical day starts around 7 a.m. at the lab. I work with a team of 6 other investigators, but we each handle our own cases independently unless something major comes up that requires collaboration. The office is exactly what you'd expect. Lots of screens, server racks humming in the background, the smell of fresh coffee constantly brewing. Because we all live on caffeine, I'd been at this job for about 5 years when this whole thing with Jessica went down, and I was good at what I did. Good enough that prosecutors specifically requested me for complex cases because they knew my reports would hold up in court. That kind of professional validation matters when your personal life is falling apart. You know, my setup at home was similar. Dedicated office space with 3 monitors, high-end computer equipment, and a Herman Miller chair I'd saved up for because if you're spending 10 to 12 hours a day in a chair, it better be comfortable. I'd work from home occasionally when I needed to focus without office distractions, analyzing patterns in financial transactions, or tracing digital footprints across multiple platforms. The job also meant I had a pretty good understanding of how people lie, how they try to cover their tracks, and what red flags look like when someone's behavior doesn't match their story. That skill would come in handy later, though I didn't know it at the time. I met Jessica about 18 months ago at a board game cafe downtown during one of their weekly trivia nights. The place was called Game Night, one of those trendy spots with craft sodas, board games lining the walls, and a trivia host who took his job way too seriously. My buddy Ethan had dragged me there after I'd spent 3 straight weekends working on a particularly complex fraud case. "Dude, you need to interact with humans who aren't criminals or lawyers," he'd said. We were both on competing teams. My team was called the Fact Checkers, mostly people from work and a couple of Ethan's friends. Jessica's team was Why Not? Her and 4 other women I'd later come to know way too well. The final round came down to a tiebreaker question about forensic science, which I nailed because, well, that's literally my job. After we tied for first place and split the gift card prize, Jessica came over to our table. "Okay, I have to know, how did you know that answer about luminol detection? That was incredibly specific." I explained that I worked in digital forensics, but had done some training with traditional forensic techniques. She was fascinated, started asking questions about my work, and before I knew it, we were grabbing coffee at the shop next door while Ethan gave me an enthusiastic thumbs up behind her back. We talked for 3 hours straight that first night. She told me about her work creating social media campaigns for wellness brands, organic skincare companies, mindfulness apps, sustainable fashion lines. It sounded interesting, even if I didn't really understand the appeal of paying $50 for face cream. She made it sound like art, this careful crafting of messages and images to connect with people emotionally. We bonded over our shared obsession with true crime podcasts. She loved the storytelling aspect, the psychological profiles. I appreciated the technical details about evidence collection and investigation procedures. We'd debate theories about unsolved cases, and she actually listened to my opinions instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. She also loved weekend farmers market visits, which most people our age found boring. But Jessica would spend hours wandering through the stalls, talking to vendors about their products, picking out fresh produce like she was selecting art pieces. I found it charming. This attention to detail, this appreciation for quality over convenience. Jessica was 27, attractive in that effortless way some women have. Blonde hair usually pulled back in a messy bun, minimal makeup, yoga pants and oversized sweaters as her default outfit. She had this infectious laugh that started as a giggle and built into something that made everyone around her smile. Even my dry observations about forensic science methodology seemed genuinely interesting to her, or at least she was good at pretending they were. Those first few months were great. We fell into an easy rhythm. She'd come over after work. We'd cook dinner together, watch documentaries or true crime shows, talk about our days. She seemed impressed by my setup, my apartment, the fact that I had my life together. "You're so much more mature than the guys I usually date," she'd say. I should have asked what happened to those other guys. Might have been educational. We clicked immediately, or at least I thought we did. Looking back now with the benefit of hindsight and a lot of processing time, there were signs I should have caught earlier. But when you're in it, when you think you've found someone special, you tend to overlook the red flags waving right in front of your face. Your brain does this thing where it explains away the concerning behavior, fills in the gaps with optimistic interpretations, and convinces you that everything is fine because you want it to be fine. We moved in together after 6 months. My apartment was bigger, a 2-bedroom place in the Hawthorne district that I'd been renting for 3 years. One bedroom I used as my home office. The other as my actual bedroom made sense to combine households, especially since Jessica's lease was ending and she was spending most nights at my place anyway. The lease was in my name, had been since I moved in, and I'd built up a good relationship with my landlord over the years. When I mentioned Jessica moving in, he just updated the occupancy information and reminded me I was still the sole person legally responsible for the rent fine by me. I made good money and could cover it easily. Jessica contributed to groceries and utilities, which seemed fair since I was providing the actual housing looking back. I should have realized how one-sided that arrangement was. But I was raised to be a provider, to take care of my partner, and it felt natural to shoulder the bigger financial burden. My dad did it. My grandfather did it. Seemed like the right thing to do. Moving her in was exciting at the time. We spent a weekend rearranging furniture, making space in my closets for her clothes, clearing a bathroom drawer for her makeup and skincare products. She had strong opinions about decorating, wanted to add plants everywhere, change out my basic curtains for something more intentional, and insisted we needed throw pillows on the couch, because apparently 3 pillows wasn't enough. I went along with most of it because making her happy seemed more important than maintaining my bachelor pad aesthetic. Plus, I'll admit, having someone to come home to was nice. The apartment felt more alive with her there, even if it also felt more cluttered. I genuinely believed we'd found something real, something built on actual shared values, an intellectual connection, rather than just convenience or physical attraction. We'd have deep conversations about cases I was working on, debate philosophical questions about justice and morality, plan hypothetical vacations to places we both wanted to visit. But there was this undercurrent I didn't fully recognize at first. That's where I made my first mistake, not paying closer attention to how often Jessica consulted her tight-knit college sorority sisters before making even the most basic decisions about our relationship. Not just the big stuff, where to go for vacation, whether to attend my work holiday party, but tiny things too. What to make for dinner, whether to get a new comforter, what show to watch on a random Tuesday night. She'd pull out her phone constantly, texting her friends, getting their input, waiting for their approval before committing to anything. At first, I thought she was just being considerate, wanting second opinions to make sure she was making good choices. Seemed responsible, even admirable. I didn't realize she was asking for permission. These 5 women had maintained their group dynamic for years after graduation. They'd all been in the same sorority at Oregon State, lived together in the house for 3 years, and apparently decided that graduating didn't mean their sisterhood had to end. In theory, that's sweet. Maintaining close friendships into adulthood takes effort, and I respected their commitment to staying connected. In practice, it was a recipe for disaster. They met every Thursday evening for what they called Sister Circle, dinner at someone's apartment where they'd supposedly catch up on life, support each other through challenges, and maintain their bond. What it actually was, I'd later discover, was a weekly meeting where they'd analyze and evaluate every aspect of each other's lives, offering guidance that was really just thinly disguised control. They treated every major life choice like a committee vote, requiring unanimous approval before anyone could proceed. And I mean everything Job offers. Apartment leases, relationship decisions, even haircuts apparently needed group consensus. At first, I found their closeness charming, even admirable. The way they supported each other through career transitions, family drama, and romantic disappointments seemed genuine. I remember the first time I met them all together. It was maybe 2 months into dating Jessica. She'd invited me to a birthday brunch for one of the group, Madison, turning 27, at some trendy spot with a 2-hour wait and overpriced egg dishes. The 5 of them arrived as a unit, all dressed in coordinated casual chic outfits like they'd planned it, which they probably had. Vanessa, the self-appointed leader, immediately started asking me questions. Not the normal, how did you meet Jessica, getting to know you stuff. More like interview questions. What did I do for work? Where did I see myself in 5 years? What were my views on relationships and commitment? Did I want kids someday? What were my long-term financial goals? I thought she was just being thorough, maybe protective of her friend. Didn't realize I was being evaluated for compatibility with their predetermined standards. But I gradually started noticing how Jessica would defer to their collective opinions on everything. And I mean everything. Vacation destinations, whether I could join their monthly escape room challenges, weekend plans, even what we should have for dinner on random Tuesday nights. The first real warning sign came about 4 months into our relationship. Jessica and I were planning our first romantic weekend trip together. A coastal cabin rental I'd found that had great reviews and was within our budget. Nothing fancy, just a chance to get away and spend quality time together. Jessica spent an entire evening on video chat with the group, describing every single detail of my proposal for the trip, where it was located, how much it cost, what activities were nearby, what the weather forecast looked like, while they offered running commentary about my choice of location, budget allocation, and timing relative to her work schedule. I remember sitting on the couch, pretending to read a book while actually listening to them dissect my planning like I was some kind of event coordinator being reviewed by clients. Is he sure that's the best area? Couldn't he have picked somewhere more Instagrammable? That seems kind of cheap for a romantic getaway. The trip ended up being great, but the experience of having it pre-approved by committee left a weird taste in my mouth. That's when I started noticing the pattern more clearly. They weren't just offering friendly advice or emotional support. They were actively evaluating everything I did, discussing my compatibility score like I was a job candidate being reviewed by a hiring committee with predetermined criteria. The dynamic became increasingly obvious during group gatherings. I'd catch them exchanging meaningful glances and subtle nods whenever I expressed an opinion that didn't align with their predetermined expectations about what constituted appropriate boyfriend behavior. They'd developed this sophisticated system of asking loaded questions specifically designed to reveal my true character. Questions about whether I preferred staying in with documentaries or going out to trendy spots, how I felt about social media displays of affection, what my long-term financial goals looked like, whether I supported Jessica's career ambitions or expected traditional relationship roles. Every conversation felt like a test I didn't know I was taking. I started recognizing the deliberate pattern, how they'd strategically steer discussions toward topics that would force me to reveal potential warning signs according to whatever relationship advice they'd absorbed from their favorite psychology podcasts and Instagram influencers. During one dinner at Vanessa's place, they spent 20 minutes grilling me about my career trajectory. "So, you're happy just staying in forensics?" Madison asked, with this tone that suggested I should be ashamed of not having CEO ambitions. "Don't you want to do something more entrepreneurial?" I explained that I loved my work, that I was good at it, and that I made a solid living. Apparently, that was the wrong answer. The looks they exchanged told me I'd just failed some invisible test. Another time, Harper brought up how her boyfriend had surprised her with a weekend trip to wine country. Then everyone looked at me expectantly, like I was supposed to immediately book something similar to prove my worth. When I mentioned that Jessica and I were saving for a bigger trip next year, Skylar actually said, "Oh, so you're more of a planner than a romantic." Can't win with these people. What I didn't understand at the time was that this wasn't casual friendship input or well-meaning concern. It was a coordinated evaluation process specifically designed to determine whether I met their collective standards for what they considered an appropriate romantic partner for their precious Jessica. Looking back, I can see how naive I was to think that dating one person meant building a relationship with just her, rather than navigating the complex social hierarchy of her chosen family, who had apparently appointed themselves as relationship gatekeepers with veto power over her romantic future. The breaking point came about 15 months into our relationship, during their monthly gathering at Vanessa's upscale apartment. I discovered they'd been holding what they called an intervention, specifically designed to reach a collective verdict about my relationship worthiness. I was supposed to pick up Jessica after what I thought was just another casual get-together. We had plans to grab dinner and catch a movie. Normal Friday night stuff. I showed up at Vanessa's building around 8 p.m., buzzed up, and walked into what felt like a corporate boardroom meeting with myself as the unwitting subject under review. The scene was surreal. All 6 of them were arranged in the living room, like some kind of tribunal. Vanessa stood by her wall-mounted television, remote in hand, looking like a prosecutor about to present damning evidence. The other four sat on the couch and chairs, faces serious. And Jessica sat in the middle, hands folded in her lap, looking like a defendant awaiting sentencing. But here's the part that still blows my mind. Vanessa had prepared an actual PowerPoint presentation. I'm not exaggerating. A full professional presentation displayed on her TV, complete with slides detailing what she termed my concerning behavioral patterns and compatibility red flags that threatened Jessica's long-term happiness and personal growth. I stood there in absolute disbelief as she clicked through professionally designed slides. The presentation criticized my preference for documentary nights over club hopping, my habit of fact-checking their gossip stories when they shared obviously embellished rumors, my tendency to suggest budget-friendly date options instead of expensive restaurant reservations, my apparent failure to provide adequate social media validation through public displays of affection. The presentation included actual charts, bar graphs comparing my behavior to what they'd researched as ideal boyfriend standards from relationship psychology articles, numerical scores rating my performance in categories like emotional availability, social compatibility, and long-term provider potential, as if I were a product being evaluated for market viability. One slide was titled Communication Concerns and listed things like prefers deep conversations over small talk, doesn't respond to group chat messages quickly enough, and questions group decisions instead of supporting them automatically. Apparently, having my own opinions was a character flaw. Another slide compared my income and career trajectory to some imaginary standard they'd created. Despite the fact that I made solid money, owned my own place, and had excellent job security, apparently I wasn't ambitious enough because I wasn't chasing executive positions or starting a company. Each friend had contributed their observations and concerns, creating a comprehensive case file that painted me as emotionally unavailable, socially awkward, financially inadequate, and fundamentally incompatible with their vision of what Jessica deserved. In a romantic partnership, Vanessa was in full presentation mode, using a laser pointer and everything. As you can see from this data, Blake demonstrates a pattern of prioritizing his own interests over Jessica's social needs. Note the frequency of canceled plans for work obligations. That's when I found my voice. Hold on. Does anyone want to include me in this discussion about my own relationship? The room fell silent. The kind of silence where you can hear people breathing. Vanessa looked annoyed that I'd interrupted her TED Talk. The others suddenly found their phones very interesting. That's when Jessica stood up from the couch. She looked directly at me with what I can only describe as rehearsed conviction and delivered the line that ended everything between us in the most humiliating way possible. She gestured toward her friends like they were a board of directors who'd reached a unanimous decision and announced, "We've decided you're not my type, Blake. This isn't working anymore. Not, I've decided. Not, I think we should talk. But, we've decided." Like our relationship was a group project, and the committee had voted me out. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, processing what I'd just heard. 18 months together, living in my apartment, sharing a life. And she was ending it based on a group vote with a PowerPoint presentation as evidence. The silence stretched out. They were all watching me, probably expecting me to beg or argue, or get emotional, make a scene they could later dissect and add to their narrative about why I was the problem. Instead, I felt this weird calm wash over me. Like everything suddenly made sense. All those times Jessica had changed her mind about plans after talking to the group. All those loaded questions at gatherings. All those concerns she'd bring up that sounded exactly like things Vanessa would say. I looked at each of them, then back at Jessica. Thanks for clarifying I was dating all of you. Would have been nice to know that up front. Then I turned and walked out of that apartment, leaving them sitting there with their presentation still on the screen. The walk to my car felt surreal, like I was moving through a dream. I could hear raised voices from the apartment, probably arguing about how I'd reacted. But I kept walking. Got in my truck, drove home, and sat in my living room for a while, just processing. My phone started blowing up about 20 minutes later. Text after text from Jessica. "You can't just leave like that. We need to talk about this like adults. You're being childish. I deserve an explanation for your behavior." The mental gymnastics were impressive. She'd just publicly dumped me based on a committee vote with supporting PowerPoint slides, and somehow I was the one who owed her an explanation for my behavior. I didn't respond. Just set the phone down and started thinking practically about what needed to happen next. First thing Saturday morning, I changed all my passwords. Streaming services, food delivery apps, everything we'd shared. Then I took her name off my apartment insurance and emergency contact lists. called my landlord and explained the situation. Since Jessica had never been on the lease and hadn't been paying rent, she'd been contributing to groceries and utilities, but the apartment was fully mine. There was no legal complication, I just needed to make sure she couldn't claim tenants' rights. Spent Saturday afternoon boxing up her stuff. Clothes, toiletries, decorations she'd brought, books, all of it. Everything carefully packed and labeled, because I wasn't going to give her any ammunition to claim I'd damaged or stolen her property. My buddy Ethan came over to help and provide moral support. He'd met Jessica a few times and never really liked her. Dude, I'm not going to say I told you so, but the PowerPoint thing is genuinely insane. Who does that? People who think relationships are something you can optimize with data, apparently. By Sunday evening, everything was packed and ready to go. I texted Jessica. Your belongings are packed and ready for pickup. Let me know when you can collect them. After that, we have nothing further to discuss. Her response came immediately. Can't we talk about this? The girls were just trying to help me see things clearly. They care about me. They care about controlling you. Not the same thing. Pick up your stuff. She tried calling multiple times. I didn't answer. Eventually, she texted that she'd come by Tuesday evening after work. Monday, I got a message from Madison. You really hurt Jessica. She's devastated. Was just trying to be honest with you about concerns we all had. Very immature of you to just walk out. I blocked her, then blocked Harper, Kennedy, and Skylar when they sent similar messages. Vanessa's message was the most entertaining. Your reaction proved everything we identified in our analysis. Thank you for validating our concerns about your emotional stability. Blocked her too. Tuesday evening, Jessica showed up with Vanessa as backup. I'd arranged all the boxes in my building's lobby, labeled with her name. They were loading things into Vanessa's SUV when Jessica tried one more time. Blake, please, can we just talk about what happened? I made a mistake letting them influence me so much. We can work through this. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. Jessica, you stood in front of me and 5 other people and announced that we had decided I wasn't good enough. You let them create a presentation about my inadequacies. You made me feel like I was on trial for the crime of being myself. There's nothing to work through. But I love you. You don't. You love the idea of having a boyfriend who checks boxes on some list they created. That's not the same thing. Vanessa stepped forward. She's trying to apologize. You could at least... Vanessa, with all respect, mind your own relationship. Oh wait, you don't have one. Maybe that's why you spend so much time managing everyone else's. That shut her up. They finished loading the boxes and left without another word. Over the next few weeks, the story spread through our mutual social circles. The PowerPoint detail was too bizarre not to share, and people had predictable reactions. Some thought it was hilarious. Some thought it was psychotic. Most were just stunned that adults actually behaved this way. Jessica's friend group went into damage control mode, trying to spin the narrative. According to their version, I'd overreacted to constructive feedback and couldn't handle honest communication about relationship concerns. They conveniently left out the part about the formal presentation and group vote. But then something interesting happened. Other people started coming forward with their own stories about the group's behavior. An ex-boyfriend of Harper's reached out to say they'd done something similar to him, arranged an intervention where they'd listed all his supposed flaws and demanded he change or Harper would leave him. He'd tried to change, became miserable, and eventually they broke up anyway when he couldn't meet their impossible standards. Kennedy's ex-girlfriend shared that she'd been subjected to constant group evaluations and check-ins, where they'd analyze every aspect of her relationship, offering unsolicited advice about everything from her career to her appearance. Turned out this friend group had a pattern. They'd identify someone they deemed not good enough for their friends, systematically undermine the relationship through constant criticism and doubt, then orchestrate some dramatic confrontation that forced a breakup, all while positioning themselves as caring friends just looking out for their besties. It was manipulation disguised as support, control disguised as care. About 6 weeks after the breakup, I was at Powell's Books browsing the true crime section, a Saturday ritual I'd maintained even during the relationship, when someone approached me. "Excuse me, are you Blake?" I turned to find a woman about my age, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, glasses, holding a book about forensic psychology. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her immediately. "Yeah, that's me. Do I know you?" She smiled. "We've crossed paths at a few forensics conferences. I'm Morgan. I work in cybersecurity consulting. I heard about what happened with your ex through the professional grapevine." She paused. "Sorry if this is weird, but that PowerPoint story is legendary in the tech community. I had to verify if it was actually true." I laughed despite myself. "Unfortunately, yes. Complete with bar graphs, numerical scoring systems, and a laser pointer for emphasis. She shook her head in disbelief. That's genuinely unhinged. I've been to some weird corporate presentations, but using PowerPoint to break up with someone is a whole new level. Want to grab coffee and compare notes about digital forensics? Purely professional interest, no hidden agenda or friend committee required. That last line sealed it. We ended up talking for 3 hours at the coffee shop attached to the bookstore. Morgan was smart, funny, and refreshingly direct. No games, no hidden meanings, no checking with friends before expressing an opinion. She worked in corporate cybersecurity, helping companies identify vulnerabilities before hackers could exploit them. Her specialty was social engineering, understanding how people manipulate systems and other people to gain access to information they shouldn't have. Essentially, she studied human behavior to predict and prevent security breaches. We geeked out about encryption methods, social engineering tactics, and the latest developments in digital evidence collection. She told me about a recent case where she'd helped a healthcare company prevent a major ransomware attack by identifying suspicious patterns in their network traffic. I shared details about a fraud investigation I'd worked on where the perpetrator had tried to cover their tracks by using military-grade encryption. Spoiler alert, they didn't do it correctly. What struck me most was how easy the conversation felt. No performance, no hidden tests, no weird energy where I felt like I was being evaluated. Just two people who found each other interesting and enjoyed talking about shared professional interests. It was refreshing in a way I hadn't experienced in months. Before we parted ways, Morgan asked if I'd be interested in grabbing dinner sometime. Fair warning, she said with a smile. I have friends, but they don't vote on my relationship decisions. I make those myself like a functional adult. That's the most attractive thing anyone said to me in months. Our first official date was at a Thai restaurant downtown. We talked about everything, our careers, our families, our hobbies outside of work. Morgan was into rock climbing, had a collection of vintage science fiction novels, and could discuss the intricacies of network security architecture with the same enthusiasm most people reserved for discussing their favorite TV shows. She was also remarkably independent, had her own apartment, her own career, her own money, her own life that didn't require constant validation or input from a committee of friends. When I mentioned I was thinking about upgrading my home office setup, she gave me specific recommendations based on her own experience, not on what she thought I should want. The difference between being with Morgan and being with Jessica became more apparent with every date. With Jessica, I'd always felt like I was performing, trying to meet some invisible standard, walking on eggshells around topics that might trigger a group consultation session. With Morgan, I could just be myself, analytical, sometimes overly logical, content to spend a Friday night at home watching documentaries instead of bar hopping. I love that you're not trying to be someone you're not, Morgan told me on our fourth date. We were at her apartment, testing out her new espresso machine while discussing a cybersecurity conference we were both planning to attend. Jessica's loss, honestly. Anyone who needs external validation to determine if they like someone isn't ready for a real relationship. Coffee dates turned into dinner dates. Dinner dates turned into weekend hikes in the Columbia River Gorge and trips to the Portland Art Museum. Within a couple of months, we were officially together. Though it never felt like a big dramatic decision, it just felt natural, easy, right? The difference between being with Morgan and being with Jessica was night and day. Morgan had friends, good friends, but they treated our relationship like it was ours to navigate. They'd ask how things were going, offer support when needed, but never once tried to evaluate whether I was good enough or suggest Morgan could do better. When Morgan mentioned me to her friends, they'd say things like, "You seem happy, and we'd love to meet him sometime," not, "Are you sure about this?" Or, "Have you considered whether he meets your long-term goals?" It was what healthy friendship looked like. Support without control, care without manipulation. About 8 months into our relationship, we were at a local art gallery opening. Morgan's friend was exhibiting photographs when I spotted Jessica across the room. She looked different, thinner, tired. She was alone, which was unusual. The friend group was normally attached at the hip. Our eyes met across the gallery. She immediately started walking toward us, determination on her face. I felt Morgan tense slightly beside me. "Blake, I need to talk to you." Jessica's voice was urgent, almost desperate. "I'm here with Morgan. We have nothing to discuss. Please, just 5 minutes. I need you to understand what happened. They manipulated me. The whole friend group, they were toxic, and I didn't see it until..." "Until what? Until they turned on you? Until you weren't useful anymore?" Her face crumpled. "It's not like that. I've been in counseling. I've learned so much about manipulation and codependency and..." "Good for you, Jessica. I'm glad you're getting help. But that doesn't change what happened or make us friends. But you have to understand, I was under so much pressure. They made me think. Morgan stepped forward. Hi, I'm Morgan, Blake's girlfriend. It seems like you're working through some things, which is great, but this isn't the appropriate time or place. Jessica looked at Morgan like she'd just noticed her. You don't understand. Blake and I have history. We were building a life together before everything went wrong. I understand you made a choice. Now you're dealing with the consequences. Morgan's voice was calm but firm. Blake's moved on. I think you should too. That's when Jessica's composure completely shattered. She raised her voice, drawing attention from other gallery visitors. You don't know what you're talking about. He was supposed to be mine. We had plans. Those horrible friends ruined everything. And now he's with you. And it's not fair. Gallery security started moving toward us. The scene was causing enough disruption that several people had their phones out, recording. I kept my voice level. Jessica, you need to leave. This behavior isn't healthy. I know what I did was wrong. I know that. But I've changed. I've learned. You have to give me another chance. Security arrived. A stern-looking woman in a suit politely but firmly asked Jessica to leave the premises. Jessica tried to argue, but when they threatened to call the police, she finally backed down. As she was being escorted out, she shouted back at me, You'll regret this. We were perfect together and you know it. Morgan slipped her hand into mine. Well, that was intense. You okay? I nodded. Yeah, just sad, really. She's still not taking responsibility. It's still about what was done to her, not what she chose to do. The incident got posted on social media. Multiple people had recorded Jessica's meltdown. The video spread through our extended social network, with former friends adding commentary about her public humiliation and their narrow escape from her obvious psychological instability. The friend group, predictably, distanced themselves from Jessica entirely. According to mutual acquaintances, they'd turned on her after the breakup when she started questioning their influence and pulling back from their control. The same treatment they'd helped Jessica give to me. Turned out when you weren't useful to their social hierarchy anymore. When you questioned their authority or tried to establish independence, you got cut off completely. The loving support disappeared the moment you stopped being compliant. Jessica had learned the hard way what I'd already figured out. That friend group didn't actually care about anyone's happiness or well-being. They cared about maintaining power and control within their social structure. Anyone who threatened that dynamic, whether by pointing out their manipulation or by simply being deemed not good enough, got systematically removed. 3 months after the gallery incident, I proposed to Morgan during a private stargazing session at the Mount Hood Observatory. We'd driven up for one of their special astronomy nights, and I'd arranged with the staff to have a few minutes alone on the observation deck after the program ended, under a sky full of stars, with Portland spread out in the distance. I told Morgan that she was the first person I'd been with who made me feel like being myself was not just acceptable but actually valued. That her support felt like freedom, not pressure. That I wanted to build a life with someone who celebrated my strengths instead of cataloging my weaknesses. She said yes before I even finished the whole speech. The proposal was perfectly suited to both our personalities. Quiet and intimate rather than performative, focused on our shared love of learning and discovery, rather than creating content for social media validation. We kept the wedding planning simple. Close family and friends only. No drama, no committee votes, no hidden agendas. Just people who genuinely cared about us and supported our decision to build a life together. Morgan's friends were genuinely excited about our engagement, asking thoughtful questions about our plans and offering practical help, without trying to insert their opinions about what constituted appropriate wedding planning or relationship milestone timing. The contrast between healthy friendship support and toxic group interference couldn't have been more obvious. Friends celebrated someone's happiness without needing to control or approve every decision involved in building a life together. About a month before our wedding, I got a LinkedIn message from Jessica. The message was carefully worded to avoid triggering harassment concerns while expressing her understanding of how group pressure had influenced her behavior and decision-making throughout our relationship. She wrote about months of counseling, learning to recognize manipulation patterns, rebuilding her decision-making confidence, and developing healthy boundaries with people who disguised control as care. She acknowledged that I'd been treated unfairly and that she took full responsibility for her choices, regardless of external pressure. The message ended with a request for what she called closure, acknowledgement that she understood what had happened, and genuine wishes for my happiness. I showed the message to Morgan. She read it carefully, then looked at me. What do you want to do? Nothing. Any response just opens a door that should stay closed. Agreed. I blocked Jessica on LinkedIn and never looked back. I heard through the social grapevine that Jessica eventually cut ties with the friend group completely. She moved to Seattle for a fresh start, found better friends who supported her without trying to control her, and from what I understand, she's doing okay. Working at a marketing firm up there, apparently dating someone new, learning to trust her own judgment instead of outsourcing her decisions to a toxic social circle. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.